I got to ask you, because your firm's growing so rapidly, has your philosophies changed, or are you just still staying super focused?
We're doing a little bit more of a shotgun approach. Digital will always be king. No one's going to dethrone Google. But obviously, social media has changed since we last spoke, so we're doing a lot more TikToks, for instance. And as far as some of the traditional marketing, we're able to be a little bit more focused, right? There's your traditional radio, but now with Spotify and Pandora, you can target people, or even, whether it's Hulu or some other kind of TV platforms, you can actually target people in a much more focused way on some of the older traditional forms of advertising than you could previously if you're just advertising on cable TV. So we are doing some of that. Places that we are running a lot of Google ads, for instance, we will put up billboards as well. So, again, not so much of a, kind of a traditional play, but we are adding some of those traditional forms of advertising on top of our digital.
Yeah, and I gotta applaud you from like the Spotify and some of these other channels. I feel like it's not talked about. It's like one of those things. So there's not as much competition, so you can get those low cost per 1,000 impressions compared to like, where everyone goes and where attention goes, and everyone starts advertising, all the costs just jump up.
Oh yeah, the CPM is great on some of those, so I kind of encourage folks to get in there. You know me, like for me, I don't want to hold it to myself. I want customers to make the best decision. Obviously, I think I bring some things to the table that a lot of personal injury firms don't. So I'd rather have higher quality competition in there than some of these folks that really, they're lawyers, but they're not really in the practice of law. They're in the business of law. So
yeah, trying to just get as many cases as possible, burn through them, and maybe not work up the cases in the same. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you back on, it's kind of self-serving, but also, I love speaking to you. You're always very willing to share. Is you guys are crushing social media with your video marketing specifically. I love the like green screen, the different transitions that you're doing. So the first thing I got to ask though is, how do you know it's working? Because the attribution's murky, and how does it translate into your overall goals for the business?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we do have some software, and I'm not trying to hold it back. I just don't recall what it is that does some sort of complicated attribution work for us. Again, I can share that, and you can share that with your listeners and so forth. But, I know it's working because, obviously, we use all the same kind of call metrics and tracking that everyone else does, but we also ask people, and people stop me all the time. I mean, all over the world, right? I'm traveling with my wife. People, hey, man, I saw your TikTok, or what's going on with Johnny Depp? We try to make law interesting because, listen, man, fundamentally, I don't care if it's personal injury law or SEO, unless you're a legal nerd or you're a technical guy or girl, this isn't, pop culture. So we're really trying to introduce, pop culture and law. And again, there's some cases that kind of bring it all together. And because I'm doing so much like PR work and legal commentary, I try to bring that in, whether it's for an SEO link or someone to say, hey, I saw this guy on TV, I saw him in print, I want to hire him as opposed to all these other lawyers out there.
Yeah, and that was going to be, honestly, that was going to be a follow-up question of mine, because I happen to be a TikTok person that can't put the phone down. I get sucked into TikTok, and, I saw you covering Johnny Depp, and I saw some of your material myself. And so I wanted to ask, is it part of the strategy is you've got to have some of that entertainment type stuff, the trending stuff, otherwise, maybe you're just not going to create a following? Is that like one of the key components that really makes it work?
I think so. I mean, it just goes back to, obviously the impressions on TikTok are through the roof, right? It's blowing Instagram out of the water. I don't care if it's IG Reels, posts, stories, whatever the case may be. If something new pops up and you want to be in the space, you got to hop on it. Look, it might be something like a Clubhouse ends up fizzling out, or a TikTok that ends up kind of taking over. But, I always say law is not sexy. It's not interesting. An example I give is, you're on Instagram, you're kind of scrolling through, and if you're a plastic surgeon or a dermatologist, you're talking about fillers, Botox, whatever, everyone's all about it. But we're in the business of like catastrophic injuries. We're like a orthopedic spine surgeon. No one wants to see that or think about that. So you gotta make what you're doing interesting, because fundamentally it's not sports, it's not music, it's not fashion. So that's something that we try to do, notwithstanding the not interesting subject matter of what we're dealing with.
Right, and I think, but you showcase your expertise when you're on in front of the media, and you get some of those clips kind of mixed in with the entertainment side, and you just speaking about the trending topics really helps out too. The other thing, just TikTok in general, that I've found is, I think early on the ad spend, right, and we're really new to the game, like we're no more advanced than you, or not near as advanced, excuse me. So do you think that, putting some ad dollars behind it to kind of get some additional reach, or do you think it's still, hey, organic all day, just create good viral content? Like, what's kind of your philosophy on that?
Yeah, it really depends, right? And again, one of the things, the luxury I have is I do court TV, I do law and crime almost every day, so I can easily, they're covering these cases. I'll shoot a couple TikToks or YouTube shorts or IG Reels or whatever the case may be, and we got a good team here, and they just edit it and make it look great. It really depends on the platform. And the problem with TikTok right now, if you're running ads, it doesn't go to your page, right? It's kind of its own ad, has its own comments. So whereas, some of the other platforms, or look, I mean, if you're talking about targeting, right? Maybe because you got no privacy, Facebook is probably the best, right? I mean, you're talking about only people's parents using Facebook, but if you really want to get to your target audience, whatever it is, could be e-commerce, could be your service industry like law, that's going to be the best of all the kind of big social media platforms. But I mean, who's using Facebook anymore? I think TikTok's going to evolve over time, and just like anything else, it's probably going to sell out, right? Like most of these companies ultimately do. It could be Yelp that was kind of all about reviews. Now they're running like 10 ads before the organic. Ultimately, things will change over time, and I think TikTok will start to want to monetize more. These startups are always in growth mode at the beginning. They want to be cool. They don't want to bombard people with advertising because they just want to get the largest reach possible. Once they have that captive audience, then I'm sure the ad dollars will be targeted towards individuals, and then people will get pissed off and they'll go to the next big thing.
Like, that's a trajectory, right? You have all this organic content viral. They create this community where everyone congregates, and then they make it pay to play. We saw that with Facebook. We saw it with Instagram, where you could get some organic reach, but now it's like, hey, you got to put ad dollars behind it. Yeah. The interesting thing, have you kind of looked at? It's interesting to see, and I wanted to get your thoughts on like YouTube Shorts trying to compete with TikTok, because YouTube's a behemoth. What have you seen, and you kind of alluded that TikTok's blowing Reels out of the water, but what have you seen TikTok kind of versus YouTube Shorts?
Yeah, I mean, YouTube has its own thing. Like, so we'll do long form on YouTube, which obviously doesn't work. It'll be interesting to see, because also YouTube has YouTube Kids, right? So I got kids, and kids right now, and obviously that's what everyone wants, right? Not kids, but really young adults. We're like way too old for anyone to be really targeting us, because you get younger people hooked in, and then they're hooked. So I think YouTube has a huge advantage that Meta doesn't, because Facebook and Instagram, I mean, they just haven't grown and evolved. But YouTube, because it has YouTube Kids, and you got these content creators on YouTube. I think YouTube's probably the only one. Obviously, you got Google behind it, right? That's really in a position to compete with TikTok. I don't think they're there yet in terms of the YouTube Shorts, but I mean, we pump them out, and I think if anyone has a chance to kind of even match TikTok, it will be YouTube. I don't think it's going to be Meta.
Yeah, and I heard Gary Vee recently, and everyone talks about Gary Vee, so I want to talk about team composition in a minute because you briefly mentioned it. But Gary Vee, he made this post about 3 years ago, and he had 64 pieces of content a day, and then he started talking about LinkedIn Organic, and everybody went to LinkedIn Organic and started doing a lot of LinkedIn stuff. And now today, he's just talking about TikTok. If you got any time, he's like, do 4 TikToks a day, and I think the strategy there though is there's got to be a little strategy, because I take some of our podcasts and I try to put them on there, and it's not platform correct, and it just doesn't do as well as like maybe making content specifically for TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends, right? Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn. If it's something nerdy, if I'm in, and I say it respectfully, I mean, like, I do everything. I do like TMZ, I do Us Weekly, I do their legal show every single week. That just lends me more interesting, if that content goes on TikTok. If it's going to be like I'm talking about Trump, I'm talking Newsweek or CNN or whatever, I mean, that's going to be LinkedIn. You really got to kind of know your audience, know who you're marketing to. And, some people want it really dumbed down, because TikTok, man, if you don't get them in the first like 2 to 3 seconds, they're gone. We're talking about like really short, whereas like obviously LinkedIn, even YouTube, you're going to have that longer form. People are going to be kind of more patient. Much smaller audience, but going to be, like I say, respectful, a little bit more sophisticated, going to be more willing to get into the legal weeds or whatever you want to talk about. Whereas TikTok, man, they're just not.
Being an avid TikTok user myself, and I got to applaud their algorithm because it's interest-based. So as soon as I start engaging on like real estate investing or entrepreneur stuff or motivation, like that's what I'm seeing, and that's why I like it compared to like Instagram, where some of my friends, even though they're my friends or even an entrepreneur, they may post stuff that I just don't care about. Yeah. And so the one thing that I notice though is like when I see a video, the first thing I do is I look to see how many likes it has, and like if it doesn't have very many, I'm like scrolling by. So right there's your 2-second thing. So do you think that engagement pods are going to be a thing on TikTok just like they are on LinkedIn, just like they are on Instagram, where people are artificially pumping these to get a little more visibility?
Yeah, of course. Whether it's a blue check mark or likes, people that got in early, they're going to have a huge advantage, right? They got that following. So those attorneys that, and look, we're late to the game. Maybe we're 6 months or certainly no more than 12 months late. But there are attorneys that got in right away. They got big engagements, they got big followings. So for me to catch up, or us to catch up, I gotta bang out great content, and we've been able to grow much faster in TikTok than other social media platforms because I think we're trying to do a good job. I got the team, but again, those folks that got in early, and again, you got that core group, you got the verification, and you're a known commodity. Everyone else, the public's gonna perceive as, listen, man, you're just copying, him or her. So it is tough to play catch up, but I would still encourage folks to get in because the barrier to entry in TikTok is still a lot lower than it is on Instagram.
I'd agree with that. And I see a lot of repeat content. And it's like when I see repeat content, I'm thinking, oh, well, there's not enough content on the platform when they're showing me the same stuff again. And you mentioned this earlier, so I kind of want to dig in just a little bit, if you don't mind sharing. So anytime.
Listen, man, I'm an open book, Chris. You know me,
okay.
So.
Yeah.
I actually wrote a book, by the way. I wrote a book that dropped.
We need to talk about
ago.
that too. We need to let's talk about that right now. Let's talk about the book, and then I'll ask you about the team composition afterwards. But what's the book about? Tell us about the book.
Yeah. So it's called Harvard to Hashtag, and actually I got a copy of my assistant Julia thinks it's right here. Harvard to Hashtag, and here's how it came out. I was doing middle of the pandemic. I was actually doing an interview with Nancy Grace. I think it was on George Floyd or Kyle Rittenhouse, and we're doing a commercial, and she's like, hey man, you've done all sorts of crazy things. You went to Harvard Law School, you worked at like the largest law firms in the country, you're a prosecutor for many years, now you got your own firm, you're doing PI, you should write a book. And I'm like, you know what? I will write a book. So, obviously Harvard Law School, but hashtag is like, listen, I've transitioned from, this big firm lawyer, federal prosecutor, handling cartels, corrupt politicians. Now I'm like learning, SEO and social media trends. So it kind of talks about my journey, but a lot of what we talk about here today, that hashtag part, if you're not evolving as a lawyer in a super competitive space like personal injury in a city like LA, some young kid is going to come and take over. So you got to be cutting edge and you got to be open. Again, obviously you and your team, you're always in the forefront of technology and trends and social media, but a lot of lawyers aren't. They're dinosaurs, right? They're still dealing with boxes of, paper documents. So I kind of encourage everyone, listen to the podcast, make sure you know what's coming, and you really want to kind of be ahead of the curve. It'll make your job that much easier.
Yeah, so in the book, is it kind of your story and how you've kind of pushed to, into the digital space? Like, is it like practical tips? Like, what's like the TLD, like kind of summary of what's in the book?
Yeah, exactly. The TLD is this: if you're a lawyer, look, a lot of them are kind of stuck in this sort of prestige vibe, right? Look, TikTok is beneath me. I'm not going to be on there dancing and giving away advice for free and talking to like high school kids or. You got to set that aside. If you're committed to marketing, this is something that you got to do because people are cutting the cord. They're always on their phone. It's taken over. So that's basically the bottom line lesson. And something that was really even kind of difficult for me to learn. And now I want to make sure that everyone, gets there faster and doesn't make some of the same mistakes that a lot of other lawyers are making.